Yeah, just to try and clarify, because I understand entirely where the deputy's coming from with the amendment, but perhaps, Minister, you could shed light on your understanding of whether the leader's allowance, or as it's to be called, the parliamentary activities allowance, is by necessity separated in terms of the payment and expenditure from the overall activity of the political party. So
it is separately under this Act accountable.
Yes, but in practice, does that mean that for all payroll activity, etc., that it is done entirely separately to the political party in terms of, as the Deputy was saying, P45s, tax numbers, etc., is it entirely separate to the activity of the political parties, or can it be joined? I mean, because that's a pretty.
Yeah. I mean, you ask. Sorry.
I should ask questions. We'll get all the questions together. Deputy Matthews.
Thanks, Chair. Thank you, Minister, and your colleagues for coming in. I get the feeling that going into the algebra of this Act, this bill, that in fact maybe there should be a clean slate approach, a clean page approach, and start defining exactly what these parliamentary or parliamentary activities allowances should be, and build from that, from page one, rather than trying to do sticky plaster amendments or codicils, or whatever you like to call them, to an existing framework. Because, you know, the questions arise about the status of a member of the Oireachtas throughout the course of a Dáil or a Seanad. You know, statuses change, and yet the work as a parliamentarian representing the whole people is very much there, and to take away resources to do that representative work for the whole people is undermined by the way the architecture of these allowances, even though they're going to be renamed, will continue. And that's not satisfactory. It's not transparent. It's not clear. It should be capable, this should be capable of being presented on one page, literally one page, in words and figures. And then you just stamp approval, agreed on it. That's what's done in business, and it makes sense. And you put a note down opposite.
I've had businesses of 2 pages.
Sometimes they do, but the summary page can be, you know, the consolidated balance sheet is on one page. The consolidated profit and loss account is on one page, and the consolidated fund statement is on one page, and there are notes supporting it. But the architecture is there. And that's what we should have. We should have that the members of the Dáil are 166, the members of the Seanad are 60, and we should be able to, you know, in columns and graphs on the one page, show what the allowances are, with a note underneath saying the purpose for those allowances. And also a subsidiary note to say, and that attaches to the representative throughout the lifetime of the Seanad or the Dáil. And it doesn't matter which party they go in and out of.
I think we'll be dealing that separately.
No, but this is the benefit of looking at things afresh from scratch. You don't start adding and subtracting wings, chains, or wheels to the first aeroplane or prototype that didn't fly. You go back to the drawing board with your theory and then your practical application of that theory and try it again. And I think we've reached that stage. I mean, you know, as Deputy Fleming is trying to say, I think, excuse me, I don't mean to say that, no, but what he is saying is that you start off with your tax clearance certificate as sort of your initial screening, political, financial, health screening. And what I think you're trying to say is that there should be a continuing good health certificate, tax-wise, every year for everybody who is the beneficiary, directly or indirectly. Indirectly if it's through a party, directly if it's through an individual. And if somebody leaves a party, the amount of money that's dedicated towards their parliamentary activities allowance should arguably be increased because they have less resources. They haven't got the resources of being maybe a member of a party in government where there's additional departmental resources available. So really, I think, I'd invite the Minister to start thinking again afresh, and it's not that difficult. In fact, it's easier than trying to argue and validate amendments to an existing framework that's a bit leaky.
Deputy Murphy?
I'm actually not sure about this proposal in relation to tax clearance certificate. I have absolutely no difficulty with us being tax compliant, and absolutely we should be, and things should be vouched and open, and there should be proper oversight and all the rest of it. But my understanding is that no individual, it's only political parties that actually get any kind of funding under the Electoral Acts, and that comes back to from 1938 on. And you have to get 2%, I think it is, of the first preference vote to qualify.
Yeah,
but is that not what this is about?
No. This is allowance, parliamentary activities allowance.
No, yeah, but the amendment is.
No, it's to do with leaders' allowance.
Okay, right, okay.
Minister, would you like to respond?
I would. I hope I can remember all the points. I think very important points made by Deputy Creighton. The whole idea of this is that at the time when there was huge controversy in relation to the nexus between business, developers and politics, and chunks of money going into political parties that weren't accountable, that was all changed. And it was agreed that there would be different funding mechanisms put in, some of which would be state funding, either for the political system and for the parliamentary activities element of it. Now, this particular system predates all of that, because this goes back to the 1930s, where it was always felt that we organise our political system, by and large, through party politics. Now, there are lots of individuals as well, but party politics. And party politics had to have a structural base to operate. So that system has been in place since the 1930s. So I totally disagree with Deputy Matthews that this is sticking plaster. I know, and I listened last night again to Deputy Matthews' view on these matters. Deputy Matthews has a view that once he makes a determination on something, that is wholly true and right and righteous. And that, therefore, everybody else.
How did you get that impression, Minister? How did you get that?
And everything else, we should go back to base one, because whether it was 1938 or 1998, a new dawning means that there is a new insight, and that you're lesser mortal if you don't see it through the same prism.
I'm just saying, don't be afraid to look at things in fresh.
No, stop interrupting.
I want to respond. We have an open debate here. We can spend as long as we like at it. I actually think that what the net issue in this very simple piece of legislation, the net issue, Deputy Matthews and colleagues through the chair, is to reduce the funding to the party leaders as was, to the parliamentary activities as will be under this legislation, by a factor of 10%. Analogous to the reductions we've made across other areas of public expenditure.
Sorry, Deputy, please stop interrupting.
And the second, I know there's only one way to think. Deputy Matthews' way or no way.
No, your way.
The other,
it's
please.
your document.
Can you let people speak even?
Yes.
No? Even speak.
Yeah.
Deputy Donnelly can have his own views.
Deputy Donnelly's right. You're trying to actually put me down, so go ahead.
Sorry, I'm going to say this to everyone. I'm going to insist on the people sticking to the amendments if we're going to have this kind of toing and froing going on. It's not going to happen. This is committee stage, and it's going to remain committee stage.
Three contributions that were broad-ranging, two of them about the Electoral Act, which are not at all in front of us, and I'm going to just respond as I can. I mean, I see from people who have made very strong contributions at second stage, I know the views, but I'm entitled to a view as well. And I'm entitled to have my view heard, Chair, even if it's not in accord with other people's. So, in essence, the two net issues are, one, to reduce the total funding by 10%, and secondly, to have a much more accountable, audited system for everybody that is in receipt of parliamentary activity funding, and that includes the independence for the first time, and I think that's broadly welcomed by everybody. The net issue in terms of the amendment before us is the issue of tax compliance, and it's every member of the Oireachtas is in receipt of state funding, whether it's their salary or in some way, travel allowance, whatever else it is, and should be legally obliged to be tax compliant. And I'm very happy to look at any proposal that underscores that or enhances that in any way.
I didn't make a wide-ranging speech. I just asked a specific question, and my question is, to your knowledge, how do the political parties administer this money, or these monies?
We're talking about tax compliance on this particular amendment. We can have a general debate about the spending of the money.
Correct, but to try to understand whether Deputy Fleming's amendment is valid or can be applied, or whether a new wording can be found which perhaps would be acceptable to you, Minister. I'm simply trying to establish that it's a really important point, because the funds are obviously clearly specifically designed for parliamentary activity. I completely understand that, but it's not clear to me that they are paid separately to a parliamentary party as distinct from a party. My hunch is that it is paid into a general fund which is administered by a party, largely, presumably, in compliance with the legislation, used to pay salaries for research and parliamentary activities. But can we be certain of that? Is that actually spelt out? And are you satisfied that the main political parties in the state actually spend it that way, that they spend it separately and distinctly from all of the other monies that are either raised by fundraising or through the electoral acts and so on? Do they have two distinct vehicles, if you like, for expenditure of these monies? One in compliance with this Act and one in compliance with their other obligations under the electoral acts? Because I'm just not clear, and that's the essence of my question. I'm not making a speech, I'm asking a question.
It's not to the amendment, but if the Minister would like to comment.
Well, it is. It's absolutely relevant to the amendment, because we can't understand whether the amendment is workable or feasible unless we can understand the answer to that question.
Okay, Minister.
I'm happy to answer the question as far as I can. Yes, I'm satisfied that the monies allocated of the parliamentary activities allowance to be the party leaders allowance to now can only be expended for the specific purposes designated in the Act, and they're set out in the Act. Can other funds be used for the same type of activities that are generated elsewhere? Of course they can, if parties generate separate funds for that. But what this funding is for the designated parliamentary activities, and it must be accountable for every euro that it is properly and appropriately allocated. And we're broadening that accountability now to people who received funding under this heading before, who weren't required to make those declarations and submit those reports. So
it's administered entirely separately by the political parties to the rest of the monies that are either fundraised or generated through the electoral acts?
I know, I'm saying it's accounted for separately in terms of the funding that is provided must be accounted for in accordance with this Act.